these people are dealing with their issues, and each time I touch one of the issues, it stops. That means they've healed that issue in their relationship. Okay? So when you feel the hand, you stop carrying on. Until then, you tell them what's going on. Okay? Go for it.
Daryl, emotions.
I believe you're all.
Just stay where you are. Stay where you are.
Have 20 people yell at me once is quite an experience.
Move this way a little bit so the camera can zoom in on Francis. Move that way.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Okay, what Francis is saying, she's holding up this sign that says the still small voice. And her communication is, the answer is yes. She's been saying that for quite a while because we've done this role play together, so she knew what to do. Did you hear her say that?
No.
Did you hear her say that? This is a metaphor representing the spirit side of the four functions of consciousness, which is asleep and can't be heard until you calm down these other issues, and they're going to surface and they're going to eat your lunch. Now, all his issues line up over here, okay, with your signs. And all her issues line up over there. Okay, and you all just stand right here in the middle. Now, this is so simple, but so important. These are her issues, not his. These are his issues, not hers. But what happens in a relationship, she'll start feeling angry, she'll start feeling sad, hurt, and fearful, and who's she going to blame that on? This guy right here. He's going to start feeling compulsive, guilty, regretful, self-pity. He's going to be too busy to do anything because he's out making a living for her, that ungrateful woman. Anybody ever heard that one in family vocabulary? Blaming her and not showing or expressing any feelings. And who's he going to blame for the fact that his life sucks? Any guesses? Her. Now what's interesting is if they're willing to deal with these issues, there is nothing that you can't flatten. There is no issue too big that can't be healed, as long as you know it's your issue. Now, as long as she's standing over here feeling these issues, thinking he needs to change, you wouldn't believe the amount of calls you'll get as a counselor saying, is there any way we can figure out a way to get my husband into therapy? You know, that's the issue they see. If only my husband would change, I would feel better. Well, that may be true in a certain systemic sense, but in terms of being responsible for what's going on with yourself, as long as she is feeling this pain, blaming him, she's stuck. As long as he's feeling this pain, blaming her, he's stuck. So the best thing to do is get divorced, right? Well, that's what most people do, because this is the stuff she doesn't even know is there. This is the stuff she doesn't know, and this is the stuff he doesn't know. And we've all got this stuff. There's no human being walking around on this planet, in our culture at least, that doesn't have a whole bunch of all this stuff. But we don't realize that until we're into our third or fourth. I have our third or fourth relationship. I know a lady down in Florida that was married to her fourth alcoholic husband. Her fourth alcoholic husband, before she thought, perchance, do you think it might have something to do with my relationship with my alcoholic father? Perhaps. I mean, that's an example that it's so clear everybody would get, but she didn't. And she was a counselor in an alcohol treatment center. Now look at that one, if you want to look at some strange stuff. You all can take those back with you and turn the signs in a little bit. Well, before we do that, let me just ask you all, what was that like for you?
Confusing.
Real confusing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like what?
Like I didn't really hear anyone distinctly.
Okay, so confusing, you really weren't in touch with what your issues were really trying
Right.
to tell you?
Right.
Okay, what was it like for you?
Pretty difficult. I didn't like being yelled at.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard her mostly out of everybody.
Okay, all right.
Because she was, right
In your
there.
face.
Yeah.
Let me take a vote. I really appreciate what you just said. I don't like being yelled at. Two important issues that surface here. A, everybody who likes being yelled at, please raise your hand. Everybody who likes being criticized, please raise your hand. Nobody likes it. Why do we do it? Well, what's interesting is our issues will yell at us, and that's a good reason not to pay attention to them, because they are yelling at us, and we don't like to listen to people or experiences yelling at us, and so we'll deny that they're there. That's one reason not to deal with them. But it's interesting, if you don't deal with them, you'll find yourself being yelled at by other people. I really think what happens in relationships, if we don't take the responsibility to allow our issues to surface and deal with them in a healthy way, that other person's going to find our button and hit it, and there we are dealing with it. Of course, blaming the other person, right? We wouldn't want to take responsibility for the way we feel. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share about what it was like for them? This experience, by the way, you can do, and you can go to each person and find out what their particular experience was, and it's real powerful to use that as a beginning process to go back and forth about what was going on. Because these are us, these particular issues. And that's okay, because it's just about being a human being. The problem is, if you try to be something beyond a human being, it'll eat your lunch. There's not one issue up here that you can't deal with in a real healthy way. And as counselors, these are the exact issues that you're going to be working with other people. Okay, any questions or any comments? Okay. Let's give them a hand for participating in it. You can just take those back with you. And would you help me move this out again? Thanks, sir. Does this illustration make a little bit more sense to you now? How in the world can someone wake up spiritually while they're being bombarded with all this stuff? And the interesting thing is, you don't even have to be aware of it. I mean, there are people that come into my office every day who are so mad and upset, and when I say, do you feel angry or are you upset? Oh no. Being upset's not my problem. I'm just not understood. And they are so mad, they're ready to explode. They don't even know about it. Not knowing about it does not necessarily make it go away. In fact, it usually compounds it. What happens once you get in touch with these issues? Are you home free? And I'm glad you went no. There's the next stage. Getting in touch with these issues is the first stage. The next stage is doing something about them. And my question to you is, why? Why is it so difficult to give up stupid stuff? Or another way of saying that, in common parlance psychologically, why is it so difficult to give up dysfunctional activities and conduct once you identify the dysfunctionality? Or another way of saying it, why is it difficult to give up your neuroses when you get in touch with the fact that that's what's driving you crazy? And there are a couple of things I'd like to share about that. There's a quote from a book called The Hidden Mind of Freedom that goes like this: "We hold on to emotional responses, even the negative ones, because our emotional needs and attachments are very strong. They form a major part of our identity. Letting go of them can be very frightening and confusing, for without these familiar feelings, we may no longer be sure who we are." This is why people need coaching from counselors in developing new ways of relating to themselves and others. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I'll give the second example first. I've already talked about the third example. What does she possibly see in him? And that's the counselor who's on her fourth alcoholic husband. We've already talked about her. The relationship patterns. My first divorce client. I have a chapter dedicated to my first divorce client in the book called My First Divorce Client. This lady came to me, one of the nicest, sweetest human beings I have ever met. Here I was, just 1974, fresh out of law school, ready to jump on my Charger and go to the aid of this damsel in distress and save her from this ogre who was a real nut. He started physically abusing her on her honeymoon. I mean, physically beating her up. He was one of these nutty stalker kind of guys that would call her at her work all the time, got her in trouble. I mean, just all the time, just being right, doing stuff that's nuts. He would follow her to work, from home, everywhere. Would get in her face and confront her about having all these affairs that she didn't have. That kind of a person. So I felt real good about helping her get a divorce, you know, and I got her a divorce. We ended up getting a real good property settlement agreement. It worked out real well. And I felt so good. I thought, you know, that 3 years in law school prison was worth it now because, you know, I'm really going to be able to help people and I feel good about myself. Well, this divorce client came back about 6 or 9 months later. I can't remember exactly when it was. Married to the same guy. Different last name, same guy. You know what I mean? Another sluggo. Another guy who beat her up. Another guy who harassed her. Same scenario, different last name, and I felt, well, you just fill in the blank on how you think you would feel. I went, there's something wrong with this picture. What in the world is going on? She should have known better. You know, people who you're going to start working with and helping as counselors, that's one thing we can jump to the conclusion of, well, obviously all they need to do is lose weight. So they ought to just quit eating all those calories. Well, you're going to find out that they can't for a while, possibly. The second example, or the first example on this, is the Hawaii client who quit smoking. What a story to send shivers down your back, or mine. I worked with this lady over in Hawaii. In 80 and 81, I spent 2 years over in Hawaii working on a degree in psychology, I think I mentioned earlier, at Antioch University in Honolulu. And while I was there, I worked as a marriage and family therapist at a local Lutheran church. And while I was there, a lady came to me wanting to quit smoking. And I love to help people quit smoking. And she quit. And in order to do that, I taught her some self-hypnosis. She got into a physical exercise routine where she was running and doing some things that were real healthy, started walking and then started running. She started making these smoothies in the morning using pineapple juice and papaya and mango and brewer's yeast that tasted pretty good. There's a brewer's yeast on the market that doesn't gag you. And she was using it to build up her B vitamins and feel better. And then all of a sudden she didn't come to a session. That happens sometimes, and you'll take it personally for a while and then get over it, especially if you charge them for not showing up, and then you can get over it real quick. But anyway, she called and said, you know, I'm sorry I didn't make my appointment. I said, well, that's okay. What went on? What's going on? And she said, well, I started smoking again. And I said, well, you know, my caring for you does not stop if you go back to smoking, but I'm just interested. What precipitated that event? What led up to you going back to smoking? And this is what she said, and it has stuck with me since. She said, well, as you know, I quit smoking 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. She said, I started feeling so good. It started feeling so weird. I had to go back to smoking for it to feel normal again. Now, folks, that's the key issue in changing. One of the biggest obstacles I've had in my own path of healing and feeling better about myself is feeling good, feeling good, feeling good, feeling good. Toughest thing for me to learn ever. I became an expert at